Awakening the Dreamer, Changing the Dream. And it was produced by an organization called Pachamama Alliance. And in that course, I really, they showed us how all of the climate issues and all of the global issues were connected. And I began to see how we need to really start to get into action. Mostly with climate change, but with all the social justice issues that also are a part of that. And so I said, it kind of leaves you in a question at the end of that course. And they say, what would you like to do about it? And I thought to myself, well, I'm a mom, and I'm a choreographer and dance teacher. And I thought, well, that's what I have to offer. So I began a small nonprofit and started teaching my daughter and my daughter's friends how to dance, and my son and my son's friends. And then, looking at Rachel going, Rachel's one of those friends! And what we began to do was do pieces about social justice, environmental justice, in youth incarceration, plastics in the ocean, and we performed all over Los Angeles, and 2 years ago we ended up going all the way to Toronto. And that's how this all began. Now we're move the world's focus from the problems to the solutions. And recently I spoke to my friend Terry Kruger at Pachamama just 6 months ago, and she says, Drawdown. That's what we need to be doing. Because so much of what we're hearing in the world is about the problem of climate change and global warming, but there's very little coming together around the solutions. So I'm going to lay out for you a little bit about that tonight. I'd just like to take a moment to thank Manzanita School. I'm an educator at Manzanita School. I'm on the board of Manzanita School, and I really appreciate deeply the work that Manzanita School does in our community of Topanga. So shout out to Dr. Paul and Miss Jenny. All right, so here we go. I'm going to suggest that we're going to be beginning something called Drawdown Topanga. What is Drawdown? Drawdown is the point at which CO2 levels peak and then begin to fall. That's a new concept. This is something that we want to understand, but we want to just imagine that it's possible. Brief understanding of why we're in this position. We're a greenhouse. We have a greenhouse effect in the world. The Earth is. Imagine a greenhouse is like, you know, that beautiful plastic art that you are under and your little seedlings are growing. Well, our container is really our atmosphere. And the fact that that container exists makes it possible for us to exist, all life on the planet. All of those, methane and carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide and water vapor, those are all natural, except for that there's too much of it. So we've been burning fossil fuels, and we've been heating up our atmosphere. So there's too much of that, of those, primarily carbon dioxide and methane. There's too much of that out in the atmosphere at this point. So therein lies our problem. We all know that severe weather is here to stay. I chose a couple of examples just from right now. We were all part of last year's fire. And in Topanga, we're really feeling it. My husband and I moved here 25 years ago. And for a good 20 years of that, yeah, there was a fire concern generally, but it wasn't terrifying. We felt we could handle it. We felt we could get through it. We had friends, we have family, we have great community support in Topanga. But in the last 5 years, it has really shifted. There's a dramatic difference when those winds truck through here. It is a bit terrifying. Just in November, there was a hillside on fire right behind our house. Delmar and I were out building compost boxes, no less, and we see this huge flame, and we run down, and we are spraying water hose, and we are in it. Thank God we have a massive, massive firefighting team here in Topanga. But that's really happening. This is the most intense hurricane on record is already predicted in Spain to have a drought, and that's 2020, and then the floods are here now in Jakarta. So just to say that we understand it's happening. I think the thing that is right now difficult and keeps people from really taking it in all the time, the fact that global warming exists and it's very real and it's very imminent, is that it affects all living things. It just doesn't affect everyone in the same way. So some people are dealing with floods, and some people are dealing with famine, some with fires. Some don't feel it much at all. Like if you just, we were out on the hills the other day, and it was gorgeous and clear and full of beautiful winter wonderland, really, in Topanga. This is the best time to be here. Green. You can kind of forget about it for a moment. So there's that sort of sense that it's remote and it's off in some faraway time. Oftentimes, even for us, it feels that way. Here is September, just 4 months ago, and it was the second lowest year for Arctic sea ice. And you can see the red line is where for the last many decades it has been. And the lowest year was in 2012. And that's Nassau right there. So they're really capturing it. Andy and I were speaking today and talking about how we're starting to see the signs, and people are really starting to wake up, and it's because we can see pictures, I believe. You know, this is a time of the great, what some people are calling the sixth extinction, where we're losing millions and millions of species on our planet. This was the reason when I took the Pachamama course that I started Move the World, because they said it's these 10 years where we were going to lose these species. And I said, well, I better get moving. I better do something. I felt the urgency, and my hope is that today we'll all remember that urgency. This is our beloved Joanna Macy. What she's telling us here is just simply that it's okay to feel sad, and it's okay to feel deeply disheartened, because that means we're compassionate beings. And I think that's critical as we move through this time. Not only that we see the difficulty and we see the ways we can also potentially fix the situation, but that we feel more deeply. I know that working at Manzanita School for me has given me the nature connection that I didn't have prior to being there and stewarding the land the way we do. And that gives me hope that if I can change, that others can change with this process. So I appreciate that she's saying that our responses arise from the depth of our caring and the truth of our interconnectedness. That our interconnectedness is really, truly the foundation of what is going to shift. And we need to shift, and we need to shift fast. So lastly, just in terms of the problem, because we're going to spend most of our time on the solutions today, I just cut and paste this from the IPCC report. This is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And when this was published, there was a certain, it's true, in the world. The press really took it up, and people really started to listen, because the 1,300 expert scientists that really came up with this, they really definitively said it's increased by 40%. And our solution is, in this last line here, limiting climate change will require substantial and sustained reductions in CO2. So it's not just that today, and it's not just for a little while, it's not just for a few years. It's really these 30 years that we're talking about, and most importantly, these 10. And that's why we're talking about this today, is that we really need to step it up. Okay, the good news. The good news is that this wonderful book, and it's back there on the table in case you want a copy, but Drawdown. It's sort of what I teach young people, I teach adults, and I teach it now in companies. So basically what this is I call it the most beautiful coffee table book of solutions, because it lays out like a beautiful coffee table book where you can read a little, see beautiful photography. And they were really smart to do this because it's accessible. And yet my 6th graders, I've got 2 in the front right here, They thumb through it, they can read it, they're intrigued by the pictures, it's exciting. So it's really that tremendous resource now, because it lays out the 100 top solutions for reversing global warming. And Paul Hawken is the author of this book. Well, he's the editor. The authors are really the scientists. I mean, this is just a small sample. There were thousands, and what I appreciate in listening to Paul Hawken is that there was nobody to fund this project. There really was no definitive collection of data on what are the solutions, how do we get out of this mess. So he actually took money out of his own pension. I think it was $150,000. And so he funded it himself, and he gave stipends to many, many, many IPCC leaders, scientists, lead authors, and they collectively mapped, measured, and modeled what were to be the 100 top solutions. And they were surprised. They crunched all the numbers, they did all the math, and then they figured it out. This is just a little snapshot of the 100 top solutions, and we'll get into them more completely. The book is laid out in sectors. So you see energy, food, land use, buildings and cities. Those would be, I think most of it, if we were wondering what would be the top solutions, those would be kind of the areas we all might think. Solar energy, and we need to change our agriculture and our food waste perhaps, but then we've got women and girls. And that has its own sector. And I think that is a powerful and wonderful truth that many of one of our top solutions. And women and girls is number 6, and family planning is number 7. And if you actually combined number 6 and number 7, it would go straight to the top. I think what's extraordinary about that and wonderful is that it's human, and it's not a thing. And it's not a solar panel, and it's not an electric grid, and it's not an electric car. It's human beings. And so when you imagine girls being able to make their way and have choices about their education, if they were to get educated past the 10th grade, then they really start to have a lot more control over their life and decide what kind of family they want and maybe be able to make those choices. That's extraordinary. So it really is the full gamut. And then, of course, we have coming attractions, which are those solutions that aren't quite online yet. So just here's the top 20. It's a lot to take in. We're certainly not going to look at all of them right now, but if you were to take a drawdown workshop, which we're going to offer to you tonight also for free at this library, within the top 10 or top 20, you can see that food are 2 and 3. So reducing food waste and a plant-rich diet, so reducing our animal intake, is really critical in this process. And then energy are 3 of the top 10. So those 2 sectors, both energy and food, those cover half of the CO2 levels that we need to draw down. And that's a powerful idea. Here they are. You can see them on the right, the electricity, food, and land use. And just for a second on food, I mean, it's obviously what we eat, but it's what we're growing. It's how the food gets to the market. It's all the packaging that is wrapping it. It's the quickie takeouts, all the containers. It's all of that, and then it's the dumping all the waste into the landfill, and that creates methane. So these are the system has to be redesigned, and it's got to be redesigned pretty fast. So that's why we're here. Okay, I'm just going to keep cooking along. Here's our friend Joanna Macy again. Grace happens when we act with others on behalf of our world. So that's what we're here to inspire and to take in and to imagine that we can do it. Okay, so the premise of Drawdown is this idea that we actually can reverse global warming. How many of you could imagine that that is possible right now? Just raise your hand. Okay, that's a pretty good. You guys are pretty optimistic. But not everybody is, right? Not everybody is. There's a malaise out there. There's oh, it's so off and distant, and this point here where everybody wants to be part of the solution, but it seems kind of remote. And really going to be part of this, or am I just not going to be here when it happens? But I was talking to my son the other day about this because he kind of feels like that. And in fact, he's not alone. Because when I teach my drawdown classes to my middle schoolers, they kind of come into the class, even my adults have done this, they come into the class kind of frustrated and a little bit resentful. Like, you adults screwed it up, and now you're expecting me to fix it. And I get that. I really get that. That's a normal human response. And so little by little, as they begin to work with the solutions instead of the problem, instead of the weight and the overwhelm of the problem, they start to lighten up and they start to cheer up and they start to get empowered as if they have something to do with the future. And I think for me, in working with Drawdown, one of the most empowering ideas is that it's not simply about healing the planet. Yes, it's critical that we heal the planet, but it's really for young people, it's about their future. This is the economy they're going to be working in. This is the future of their jobs. And I'm excited about that, and I think they get excited about that. The idea behind Drawdown is also that we're a community. Again, back to that connectedness, that working together makes this functional. If we were to work on our own, it's depressing. And it feels, the weight of it is overwhelming. But if we work on it together, there's something, it's like a wheel that's balanced, right? You have all the spokes, it goes around. You take a spoke out, a spoke out, a spoke out. Pretty soon that thing doesn't work anymore. And that's how we feel when we're not united and not connected. And then in Drawdown we'll explore these ideas. So here's a couple of examples. So reducing food waste is number 3. How many of you compost? How many are compost? Okay, we got a good contingent in here. That's awesome. In Topanga, we're pretty good about these things, but out in the world, there's a lot of people that aren't. And one of the areas that me as an activist and as an educator and with my team of friends, Delmar and EJ, we're really starting to try to help people compost. Right, Mansfield New School has been amazing. Last 5 years, composted its entire food program for 5 years. 6 tons of waste we kept out of the landfill. Amazing. We need to share that. We need to help others because people want to do the right thing. They just need support. So we have bins in the back of the room if you need it. All right. Plant-rich diet. So we all love to eat, and this is kind of a fun one. I know, I love this picture, but veganism, vegetarianism, fantastic and completely pure and beautiful, and at the very least, reducing your meat consumption. So the idea is that to reduce carbon dioxide, to reduce methane, you have to either pull it out of the atmosphere, and carbon sequestration is that process, the way a tree or a plant pulls that out of the atmosphere and then sequesters it into the soil. Or you keep it from going up in the first place, right? So plant-rich diet is really about reducing our demand for animal protein. So we aren't, eating this much. It isn't even healthy, but we've just gotten to a habit. So just simply reducing it down to a healthy level, having plant-rich being the forefront, having protein in the back. That works. If you're a vegan, even better, right? But this is how we need to all shift. And in the West, we really are the demand. So if we don't demand it, it will start to slow. Educating women and girls, I spoke about that. I mean, that's just purely inspiring. And it is locally. Our county, our Los Angeles County, has key ideas to get new education for women and girls and make parity in terms of how we're all paid. These are things that we could do locally, and then obviously in developing countries, it's a much bigger issue, and we need to support that.
Seth, can you say how educating girls reduces carbon?
Yeah, so there's a whole display right up there. One of my students did it, so Malala's up there, one child, one book, right? That's one of her phrases, but it's really, I was reading one of their statistics, and so interesting, like in in talking about this, or Andy might have the same idea. I mean, I think he's really at it day in, day out in the sustainability department in the government. But you know, statistics can be really deceiving, and you can read one set of statistics one place and it can be different in another. So I just try to hold on to the statistics that I can remember and that seem to make sense. But it seemed like 843 million fewer people we would have on the planet if 100% compliance with educating women and girls and family planning. So basically it comes down to choice. I mean, there are whole countries where women do not have the choice over their own reproduction. They're not able to choose whether they have a child. They're often, that's the only place they can go because they're not allowed to work or be educated. So it's really complicated. It's almost so difficult for us to imagine in the West where we have such freedom, really. And yet we still fight for it here, right? We're still under that process. But the fact that we can wear what we want to wear and choose our partners and not have arranged marriages. You know, in a lot of countries, women are just considered property. They're still considered property. So just imagine a young girl having the ability to educate themselves. And what Paul Hawkins says is past 10th grade is really the mark where we want to get. Is that clear? Yeah. Okay. So refrigerant management, number one. My young friend Owen is going to talk about that a little later. So I won't say too much about it, but you know, we've had air conditioning in the United States for many, many decades, and there's places on the planet, mostly in India, Pakistan, that are just getting it. And boy, do they love it. It could save lives, right? But there's problems with the chemicals that are in that, right? And I think Owen's going to talk about that. Anyway, so that was a big surprise when they were calculating that. Composting, we talked about that, but just the idea of shifting food waste, which is, if you throw it in the garbage, it becomes a problem. It produces methane, which is 26 times, am I right about that? 26 times worse than CO2 in our atmosphere and our creating the greenhouse effect. But then you take that same food and you put it in compost and you gently tend it, and then it becomes this tremendous resource. And it's actually what we need to restore our soil health, right? Our microbial life. That really, I heard the other day, 60 years of topsoil left. Is that all we've got? So 60 years of topsoil because we haven't tended our soils. We've put massive amounts of fertilizer in there and grown the, you know what, out of the soil, and now it's depleted. So if we just do this, we solve many, many, many problems at once. Electric transport, who has an electric vehicle, anybody? All right, yes, I'm getting one soon. And solar, rooftop solar, you know, yes, okay. Andy's raising his hand. Oh, and my friend Andy Garrett just got it today. Woo, and going into that. But really being our own generators of electricity. Land use, afforestation, my other friend, Stella's going to talk about that. So I won't say too much, but obviously taking care of our trees, and our trees being essential to carbon sequestration, yes? This is kind of exciting, a living building. So you probably have heard of a LEED building, and that's like LEED Platinum is like the top of the top. And then living buildings take that one step further. It's basically turning a building into the idea of a tree, where it's capturing all of its energy via solar, and it's capturing all of its water that it uses via rain, and then it is internally processing all that. It processes even its waste. So there's a building called the Bullet, I think it's called the Bullet Building in Seattle, and it's one of these living buildings. And they have composting toilets inside the building. So it does exist. There's only a few, but this is where we're headed, is really, you know, biomimicry, right? So really utilizing the best ideas from nature and working those into our building and materials. This is the last one I'm going to show you, but it's one that I really love. I don't know if you can read any of that, but it always captures my imagination, and they call it repopulating the Mammoth Steppe. So deep in Russia, there are these massive time frozen permafrost areas, and it's starting to thaw because of global warming. And so the idea is to reintroduce grazing animals that will eat all of the grass, and then it will refreeze more quickly. To try to keep the methane. There's so much methane buried beneath this land. So this is one idea that is beginning. It's already been worked on because I've seen some documentaries on it. Okay, I want you guys to stop listening for me for a second and just take a moment for yourself. So these are tons of ideas, but I'd love you to just have a moment to talk to the person who's next to you. Because with all those hands raised, with being people who are already active, I know you guys are all doing things already, but if you could share one thing that you're already doing that is contributing to reducing your carbon footprint, to reducing global warming, and one thing you see that you could be as your next step. I'm going to give you 45 seconds each. So find a friend, turn it to the person next to you, and, well, this kind of answers the question, can we really do this? Right? Can we really reduce global warming? Can we really reverse it? That's what Paul Hawkins says. Don't mitigate it, don't slow it down. We got to get out ahead of the train and lay some new track and actually turn it around, because that's what's essential for the planet. So I don't know, my younger friends probably don't know about the ozone hole, but when in the 1970s and 80s it was a really big deal. Scientists discovered another climate crisis. There was a hole in the ozone layer, and the ozone layer was protecting us from the ultraviolet rays of the sun. And so everybody was worried about skin cancer, and that's why sunscreen got really robust, right? And it was the same exact situation, where first of all there was the deniers, second of all was the industry. DuPont did not want to take those CFCs. They discovered that CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, were in our hairsprays, and in our underarm deodorant, and in our paint sprays. And DuPont did not want to deal with it. It was expensive. They did not want to take the CFCs out, because it was it was going to ruin their business. So they denied it, and then Ronald Reagan was the governor, and he didn't want us to deal with it, and then he became president, and then there was a couple cabinet members that said, we got to deal with this. This is a global crisis. And luckily Reagan was an outdoorsman, and they appealed to his, he liked to go out, work on his range with his cattle and his horses and things like that. And he started to listen, and in just 2 years, we went from total denial, and once the scientists had visual proof, like we're starting to see now with NASA and some of those photos that we've seen, once they had visual proof, they worked on the politicians, and then Margaret Thatcher, she said this great thing. She enrolled the entire global community. She said, it is life itself that we must battle to preserve. So it was Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan that actually said, yes, we're going to do it. It took a long time. It took a long time for them to get to that point, but once it was there, it was very short. 2 years to the Montreal Protocol, and everybody signed it, and about 3 more years to get them all out of the products. Now we still have the remnants, but we can see that it's healing drastically in these 17 years. So it's the same exact situation, different set of facts, but it tells us we can do it. So I just want, that's the, and this is like a really cool visual version. I was just tripping on that. It's like, that's really wild. Okay. All right. My friend Andy Shrader is going to talk a lot more about, policy, because he's the expert in that. But I thought the one thing, that, just looking at Los Angeles County, because we're in the county, we're not a city, we're a county, we don't have a mayor. But I love this one, all unincorporated areas. That means Topanga are powered 100% renewable energy in 5 years. That's 5 years from now. So that means Manzanita School will have solar, and the Topanga Community Club will have solar, and the Pine Tree Circle will have solar, right? This is where we're headed. So I just really think that's exciting, diverting, a lot of the food waste out of the landfills, a lot of other meaningful things. Tree canopy increased by 15% in 5 years. So LA County's behind this. We have the support of our government. All right, so we know the other great thing about Drawdown is that it touts the added benefits, not just reversing climate change, not reversing global warming, but the social justice benefits. Ron Foley out there, this gangsta gardener, changing parking lots to gardens. You know, it saves $74 trillion. They've calculated all the savings. Isn't that amazing? And then, of course, it, you know, nature connection itself lowers our stress. And then here's something from Elizabeth Warren, whoever you're going to vote for, but she's touting 10.6 million green jobs. So there's the future that we're talking about in terms of the green economy. This is all very important. Okay, start small. This is my plea to you guys. From animal, this could be your refrigerator right here with your packaged meat and your packaging. Could have been mine a very short time ago, to vegetable. So some of the ideas, my good friend Paige Roach always tells me, is meatless Mondays. Start with 1 day a week, right? Farmer's market, you don't have the packaging, right? And tell your market no packaging. When I went to the sustainability class at Santa Monica College, this gal was so intense. She said, this is what I do. I buy my things, I get to the checkout, and I take everything out of the packaging, and I say, I don't want to take your packaging home, here you go. And I was like, that is so bold, right? But this woman really did it. But just think about that checkout lady. She told her boss that night. And the thing is, it's like, you kind of have to be a little bold and out on the skinny branches right now. Right? So here's another thing you all can do, if you're not doing, is just get 51% of the food out of the landfill and turn it into a resource, right? Compost at home, work, or school. Manzanita School, Topanga Community Club, you can bring your compost there, or have a backyard compost. It's a mandate that businesses compost starting now. Yeah. Support one of our programs. EJ, Dell, and I were doing the Full Circle Compost program. We can bring compost into your backyard business. Here's the legislation that tells schools they have to recycle and they have to compost. They're not checking yet, but they will soon. And they're going to check on the schools first because school lunch is so much a part of the waste. So that's exciting, and we have solutions. Yay! Okay, here's our solution. Here's our little compost. Here's EJ and Dell and me up there and Truey making the compost bin. And Manzanita School students helped install this at a local school. Here's the schools that we're working with and working on them and in contact with. Of course, Manzanita has been doing it for 5 years, and they're the model. Here's another idea that I work with my students: plant trees for your air travel. So at Christmas time, at holiday time, we say, well, where are you going? Okay, how many miles is that in an airplane? And we pretty much calculated that it's for every 500 miles, you've got to plant 10 trees to offset your carbon. So you can either buy a tree at one of these kind of places online, Team Trees, One Tree Planet, they'll plant them for you, just pay. Or you could use Ecosia. Ecosia is a search engine, and 40 searches equals one tree. Right, Stella? Stella wanted me to mention Ecosia. Because the students do it. They change their search engines, right? They just do that. It's really easy. And that's an important thing. We're not paying the cost of our travel. We're really not. We need to start doing that. Okay, here's about Drawdown workshops. There's free workshops starting next Wednesday and the following Sunday. And Terry, raise your hand. Tuck, raise your hand. You guys are all educators in Drawdown. And this was a program created by Pachamama that we're all teaching now to educate. People need support. They all want to do the right thing. And who in this class has been in this group has been a Drawdown student of mine? Raise your hand. Oh yeah, I got some Drawdown students here. Thank you. But please sign up for a free class. It's free, and we'll give it to you. Okay, I'm not going to do too much of this because I'm running out of time. But just the ideas of what you do in a Drawdown class. You learn to speak about Drawdown, you implement it in your own life. So, here's some art. We use art to communicate, and there's beautiful art by my students over here on the side, which highlights the various solutions. Here's Move the World. Support our youth. That's another thing that people can do because the youth are our future. And let's work together. Just this one event, all these people, all these organizations are collaborating, and that's what it takes to work together. And here's my final, this is my inspiration for the work that I'm doing, kind of what gets me out of bed in the morning, is this quote by George Bernard Shaw. I'm of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as I live, it is my privilege to do for it what I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I love. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch, which I've got a hold of for just a moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before passing it down to the next generation. All right, that's it for me, folks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jefferson Wagner, Mayor of the City of Malibu. From the ridgeline to the coastline, from Topanga to Trancas, welcome once again to Encinal Canyon, where we're at the bottom of a mud flow from the debris from the Woolsey fire.
Today we're touring the burn areas of the Woolsey fire with a number of elected officials from the area and with the mayor of San Juan.
Es que la montaña en realidad se quemó completamente. Lo que ha sucedido es que los lagos, el lago que hay aquí, que le da...
Letting her see the devastation, which is similar to what they had in Puerto Rico with the terrible hurricanes.
She's gregarious and wonderful and highly esteemed, and she got to see our devastation from the Woolsey fire, and we shared stories about how communication was the real issue. She knew what to do, how to do it, called my girlfriend, said, "I'm here with your boyfriend."
Oh, Candace?
It was, that's really special. It's hard to explain somebody that would go into that detail and that help to make one person happy.
Are you getting all the help you need and all the assistance you need?
Sadly, we lost 3 people here to the fire. She lost 3,000.
I lived in a shelter for 4 months, and I did it because I thought that I had to go through the same experience that my constituents were going through.
I lost my home, and I was put in the hospital in intensive care because I ran out of water and I was caught in the home and I breathed in too much bad stuff.
This is where I went to high school. If you look out in the back there, that's like, that's Malibu High.
The island is still devastated and most of the population is still not back yet.
So we still have homeowners here who haven't even come back to see their debris.
When you hear the fire in the abstract, but when you actually see this entire mobile home park is level. There's virtually nothing salvageable anywhere in the area here. They lost over 100 homes, and some of the people are going to come back, and there are even signs that indicate that, and others are never going to set foot in this place again. It's everywhere you look. I mean, this was somebody's home.
We did a 5-year-old birthday party post-fire for the children who didn't get to have their birthday parties in November and December, and we did it at the Boys and Girls Club here in Malibu, which I run, and we called it the 5-year-old superpower party, and brought all of our families together and had the opportunity to convene and grieve and also kind of celebrate what we have to look forward to as a community.
We have a lot to learn from each other.
Climate change has also to do with climate justice.
The hurricanes that hit Puerto Rico, we know were more severe because of climate change, and we know that the fires that are happening in California are more severe and more frequent because of a changing climate.
It doesn't matter how rich you are or how humble your beginnings are, fire affects us all equally.
When I was younger, Eddie would go, man, anyway, anywhere. He would just go for it. With the rains and with the ash debris that's in the outflow from the creeks, the water's pretty dirty. And the county actually came out and said, the water's dirty, don't serve.
There are household chemicals here, pesticides, paints, cleaners. When you burn vinyl siding, you create really potent carcinogens. Those are there.
And we're surfers, you know, so we, like, when it runs through these creeks, like, you see it in the ocean. We haven't been, I mean, the ocean's been toxic, basically, for surfing for months.
This is one where I'd say to Eddie, you really want to get sick? Just go right on out.
It has been tragic and difficult to, as a scientist, to see these things that we predicted actually materializing.
The crisis doesn't end when the fire ended or when the hurricane left.
It's not a question of richer or poorer. It's not a question of ethnicity. It's not a question of religion.
This isn't about politics anymore. This is really about survival and quality of life, and how we can thoughtfully move forward together as one large community, not individual communities, and make sure that our kids have safe environments to grow up in and not have to live in fear of natural disaster.
Climate doesn't discriminate between your party or your background or what country you're from.
If we don't make these changes through developing a different set of values, then we're going to keep doing the exact same thing.
It feels good for us to come together, but it's also something that we have to do.
As devastating as this is, it's going to be nothing compared to the future we face if we don't address this issue. Everybody is in it together.
You can hide your head in the sand and the sand will get too hot and you'll have to pull your head out, and then what you're going to get is a bunch of smog and dust and crap, and you'll go, guess what, it's here.
We have to recognize we can't keep denying climate change. We need to all get together, take every dramatic step we can. Otherwise, this will just be a down payment on what conditions we'll be facing in the decades to come.
Now we're back. So we know that climate change didn't cause the Woolsey fire, or the Skirball fire, or the Thomas fire, or the Saddle Ridge fire, or the Palisades fire, or the Getty fire. But it's making them much, much worse. The chief of the LA Fire Department said during the Getty fire, no, during the Skirball fire, that the atmospheric conditions in the air, he had never seen them in 30 years of fighting fires as dry as they were when that fire was going on. So the air is literally drier than he's ever seen it. And like the level of detail of that is terrifying. So we've been lucky. You know, these are my kids who I can't look at without getting choked up and talking about this stuff. But you know, we've been lucky so far. And marking myself safe for the first time was a very strange experience.
Wow.
But truly the bigger picture is none of us are actually really safe. This is a real statistic, New York Times, that the global food supply is at risk from this. So here's the truth. The way the systems we're living under will come apart is in two ways, gradually and suddenly. If we do not consciously, intentionally dismantle the extractive, exploitive, capitalist society that we're living under, then it's going to start to come apart by itself. And it's already beginning. You know, how many disasters can the insurance companies withstand? How many can our state and federal governments fund? How many times can a fire-causing utility declare bankruptcy and then bounce back? And how many droughts and foods and floods can our food system rebound from? So people have been asking me, why is it all of a sudden we're starting to feel all these climate impacts? Like it seemed like there was just a little bit and then all of a sudden there was a lot. And so this chart is an exponential growth curve, and they use it in business, like with the adoption of mobile phones. And like mobile phones started slowly, but then it really took off, and suddenly everybody had one. And after the fact, exponential growth curves look relatively smooth, but when you're in the midst of them, they feel like they're divided into two stages, gradually and suddenly. The Singularity University calls this the deception of linear versus exponential growth. When you hit the "you are here" point is when things seem to accelerate into suddenly. But before you get to that, it's like sort of plodding along. So if we add some more information that's relevant about today's talk, this is called the Keeling curve. This is the graph of the accumulation of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere based on continuous measurements taken at the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii from 1958 to the present. So this is the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere from the beginning of the industrial age. That's when it first went up. And that part has been relatively flat for a couple hundred years. Then, 1958 is when Dr. Keeling started to notice emissions rising exponentially. So here's where we are today. And keeping in mind that scientists believe that to keep a stable climate, we should be well below 350 parts per million, that's where Bill McKibben's climate action group got its name, 350.org. So we've flown past 400 parts per million in a very, very short time frame on a very, very large system. So if we back up even further, that's where we are, and then business as usual, that's the exponential growth curve we're on today. And the only way to flatten it out and go the other direction is through drawdown. And through a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about today. She covered drawdown, sort of the personal responsibility aspects. And what I'm going to cover are the legislative things that we're doing in the city of Los Angeles. And why they're so important to do the drawdown activities, but also to strongly support the legislative stuff that's going on in the city, in the county, and the state. I'm not going to cover all of that, but we'll cover the city. So the reason climate disruptions feel like they're starting to come all at once is because we're way up here, so they are starting to come all at once, and they're starting to sort of pile up. Because we're much higher on the curve than society believes we are, and higher than the scientists even believe we are. So, there's an upside to exponential growth and this model that I've been talking about. These days, human beings can, to simplify beyond belief, make things happen really fast. Between 2009 and 2013, the entire world adopted smartphones and nearly destroyed the laptop industry, the personal computer industry. And that was the old days. In 2016, Pokemon Go hit 10 million downloads in 7 days. 7 days. So when we're properly motivated, we're actually remarkable creatures. And why we're properly motivated about Pokemon Go is a little bit beyond my scope today. But I do hold on to the fact that if we can do this, we can do this. The other thing that gives me hope is the organizational ability of one remarkable young lady from Sweden. Also gives me hope. This was Fridays for Future March back in September. This is Afghanistan. These are young women out there marching. This goes hand in hand with the drawdown, why it's so important to educate and empower our women. They're out there being protected by an Afghan soldier as they're marching. That's freedom of speech in a place that doesn't know or hasn't known that before. And then the way we know how things are going to go, like this march in September, is Sydney, Australia weighs in first. This is Sydney. So we knew it was going to be a big day. This is before the height of the fires. The other reason I have hope is, it may seem weird, and I know this is probably a little PTSD right now to put him up here, but if Hillary Clinton gets elected in 2019, we would continue the march of incrementalism, and we would not really be getting things done. Suddenly, this dude is in the White House, and these people are in the streets. In the city of Los Angeles, 800,000 people showed up downtown to march. Everybody's like, let's go! And we stood there. Let's go! And we stood there. And after that day I believe really changed the city council, because the city council in one day became more progressive. Because everybody was in the streets. That is democracy actually in action. And then the other cool thing And the way I've heard it described is we are the planet's immune response rising up. People are just coming out of nowhere, and random people, she's a barking. And she's like, I think I'm gonna run for Congress. And get elected and change the entire messaging around climate change for the entire country in 2 years. I mean, it's amazing. So that's the kind of thing that keeps giving me hope that we're on the right path, that spirit or God or whatever you believe in, the planet is helping us and is rooting for us, but we have to keep going. Even in Orange County, Orange County is now blue. And I don't know how the hell that happened, but they pulled it off. And if they can do that, we can do anything as far as I'm concerned. So if you toss in the Gaia theory, which I sort of touched on a minute ago, we live on a planet whose organisms work together to maintain habitable life, and whose mysteries scientists have not even begun to understand. That, you know, we stop putting the ozone destroying sprays in the air and suddenly it heals itself. And maybe that's like our skin. We get a cut and we give it an opportunity and it heals itself. We don't know what the planet is capable of. So I think we've got a really good chance of success. It's scary, and all the stuff we've been hearing lately is scary, and the fires in Australia, and the fires in Brazil, and the fires we don't hear about in Africa, which are gigantic, and the fires in Siberia. All that's really scary, but we live in an amazing place that can regenerate if we give it the opportunity. So how do we do it? What we keep finding as we've gotten into this is the world is starving for solutions and starving for leadership. And I keep like looking around hoping that somebody else has got it. And, I'm actually a screenwriter and quit doing that and started working on this because I was like, nobody's got it, nobody's taking care of it. And it's the most important thing we keep doing right now. And those two little creatures on my lap are why I keep getting up and doing it. So just to set expectations, I will not be covering Mayor Garcetti's Green New Deal sustainability plan because that's a little bit separate from what Councilmember Koretz and I have been working on, which is called the Climate Emergency Mobilization Effort. And so what we did 2 years ago, Councilmember Koretz, along with Councilmember Bob Blumenfield, authored legislation to create the very first climate emergency mobilization office in the entire world. And that was one of those moments. It was like a hard push at first, and then all of a sudden the council got it, and they're like, we got to do this. So we created it, council approved it. Other people were paying attention. The city of Berkeley noticed that we did this, declared a climate emergency, invited the council member up to speak to acknowledge that, and they were followed by Richmond and Santa Cruz and Oakland and then London, England, and then it exploded across the whole world. 1,341 climate emergency declarations in the last year and a half.
Wow.
Covered 800. So, like, people are paying attention, including the entire country of Argentina. And that's because all their glaciers are melting. Like, they get it more than we do. So, remember this? Now it's working for us. And I don't want to take all the credit for this, but what I'm saying is before LA went, there was like 3 municipalities. After that, 1,300. So, but rule number 1, never get cocky about climate action, because nature always bats last. So, so back to LA, we're starting out with the Office of Climate Emergency Mobilization Director. We're in the process of hiring this person. We've gone through 3 stages so far. We should have them on board hopefully by the end of February, but maybe by mid-March at the latest. What else we're doing is we're creating a climate emergency commission who's going to be charged with making sure that the director stays on task, make sure that we create a climate emergency mobilization implementation plan. And nobody has done this since FDR back in World War II. And so we actually have to like lead a mobilization from the city level if we're going to get there, because the feds are not going to do it, international community is not going to do it, so it's really up to us. The city council budget committee, including my boss, allocated $1 million to get this launched, and then they pointed to $15 million in the unallocated balance as extra money for projects as we move forward. So they really understand that we need to get this going. And once we've got this step-by-step process, hopefully other cities around the country and around the world will pay attention. Also, this is Mayor Garcetti's Green New Deal. I'm not going to dive into it too far, but he's included our efforts as part of his new Green New Deal, which is an update of his sustainability plan. And the part I want to point to right now is the Jobs Cabinet. But you know, go check this out online. It's really interesting and some really cutting edge stuff. But the Jobs Cabinet is going to be devoted to ensuring a just transition for workers. As we move off of fossil fuels, we need to make sure that those workers are not left behind. Because until maybe 20 years ago, they were our heroes keeping our lights on. And now we've demonized them, and that's what's not working. So we've got to figure that out, and that's what the Job Cabinet is devoted to. She mentioned this earlier, the Our County plan, also really, really well done. They did some great outreach to the frontline communities, really engaged the lower income communities, and have come out with a remarkable document for the 88 cities and the unincorporated areas. And I'm working with those folks to figure out what a regional mobilization looks like. So you might be asking yourself, what's the difference between those plans and the climate emergency mobilization effort? The climate emergency mobilization effort is that, it's a mobilization, it's what I was talking about. We need to make the climate emergency mobilization implementation plan step by step that nobody's done, and just create pilot projects and move toward mobilization mode. And what a pilot project is, for instance, is like the dry cleaners. There's actually no way to do environmentally friendly dry cleaning, even though you see it everywhere. But there's a wet cleaning method that we can transition all those guys over to. And it's been developed, and we want to start to pilot that. And that's one good way for small businesses to reduce their greenhouse gas impacts. Because dry cleaners, if you don't know, the coal plant in Page, Arizona, which is the upper right corner of Arizona, has air monitoring equipment, which we just closed down actually 2 months ago. But they have had air monitoring equipment that could tell Monday morning at 8 a.m. when the dry cleaners in LA turned on their machines. Wow. They can tell. That's how bad it is. So anyway, so that's one of the first things we're looking at. This is the Cool Cities Challenge is a $10 million gauntlet that's been thrown down to create what are called cool blocks across the city. A cool block is a traditional neighborhood of houses facing each other. One neighbor invites the rest over and says, let's work together for the next 4 months and do energy efficiency, water conservation, waste reduction, and emergency preparedness. We piloted, we started out with 16 pilot neighborhoods. We ended with like 9 or so, which is what we expected. And literally they worked really, really well. You know, if somebody invites over all your neighbors, even if you have no interest, you're going to go, so they're not talking about you. So people, 3 of the most influential cities in California, Palo Alto, San Francisco, and LA, successfully piloted this. Our most successful neighborhood is on a streetcar called Carmelina in Brentwood, where they're like, we're not going to do this twice a month like you guys. We're going to slow down, and we're going to meet once a month. So they took their time, they completed their cool block, in 2018, literally the week before the July 6th heat storm. If you remember that. And it was like their college final exam. Half the street went out and lost power that day on July 6th, and they clicked into action. They knew who had the big refrigerators, they knew who the sensitive receptors were, who the elderly folk were. They got those folks into air conditioning, they got their food into the big refrigerators, and it worked like magic. And so we want to keep that going. And we believe that we can really scale this up and spread it across the region. And I believe Topanga Canyon is particularly well suited for a community like organizing of this sort. And maybe even Manzanita School can lead the effort, because it would be really cool.
This is fantastic with this block situation, because if people do the same thing with a simple thing as their vacuums and other things that people, instead of buying 10 vacuums, you have one vacuum and it goes around every week to the different neighbors. This helps save a lot too.
Yes.
So anyway, so this is one of the models, exactly right, that that Topanga can really take on as a community and literally change and create a really great story that we can share across the country. This is similar, but for businesses. This is called Eco Districts. It's a similar concept. Our little downtown here could take this on, and it's basically the same thing. You do waste reduction, energy efficiency, water conservation, all together as a business district. And it's so the next program we piloted with this organization called Pando Populous is called City Blitz. And what this is, basically what we've been doing is organizing out ahead of the mobilization. So we've got a process in place. So City Blitz is government to government mentorship. So the city of LA is going to mentor other cities who are not as far along on sustainability. And the first City Blitz was the city of Claremont. Invited the city of Carson over, and they went through their procedures and tried to figure out how does Carson take on sustainability and all of this stuff. And so we're working on how do we create a model, again, that can then spread around to other cities across the country. So we're planning more of those soon. One of the best practices that we think we've done a good job with in the city of Los Angeles is we got chief sustainability officers and chief resilience officers in each of the departments. And so they meet once a month to really share best practices and get the city operations moving toward a sustainable direction. And within that structure, we've helped the mayor launch a water cabinet and a tree cabinet and a jobs cabinet. And hopefully when we get the new climate emergency person in place, we'll have a climate cabinet going as well. And then one of the things that cities can do is pay attention to how they spend their money. Purchasing, we spend a whole lot of money purchasing. One of the best projects that we've done, we launched this back in 2011 with the LA Food Policy Council, to require city departments who purchase food to follow steps of sustainability, environmental practices, a valued workforce, humane treatment of animals, reduction of genetically modified practices, and pesticide use. And surprisingly, last year, we actually won an award from the United Nations for this. Wow. Yeah. Like, what? All right. Cool. Because it's been spreading around. And other places have been adopting it, and this was like the secret weapon against Monsanto. You didn't know it was coming. We suddenly are buying up all the organic stuff. The more organic food that is being purchased, suddenly the more farmers realize they need to make more of it, and they get rid of the genetically modified stuff. So it's changing the whole food system. And it's just this little thing that the LA Food Policy Council and the council member partnered on, and it's just we got an award. Somebody's noticing. And then just kind of sheer purchasing power. We have an environmentally preferable purchasing policy that And then we're in the process of adopting the state of California's Buy Clean procurement policy, which establishes maximum acceptable global warming potential for eligible materials, which is like structural steel, carbon steel, like all the stuff that we build things with, but also for paper that we put in our printers and all of that. So we want to make sure that every dollar that we spend as a city matches up with our values, and that we're not paying attention. One of the weirdest things was the Department of Water and Power was printing on virgin paper their bills where they were billing people to burn coal to heat their houses, and they were cutting down rainforests in Indonesia to make the paper. And we got that stopped really quickly, but it was insane. So anyway, we want to make sure that every dollar we spend lines up with, it is moving toward drawdown, moving toward carbon reductions, and I encourage you to think about that in your own personal purchasing as well. So some of you have probably been hearing about the problems with our recycling system. And China's got something called their National Sword Policy, which has essentially halted our ability to send all our recycling there. And cities are like, oh, blah, blah, blah. But it's really, we've been doing it wrong. Like the way we set it up is we cut down our trees, we drill up our oil and natural gas, turn it into plastic or paper that we use one time, send it off to China, where they turn it into a resource, send it on a big ship, which is polluting greenhouse gas emissions. It's like the craziest way you could design things. So this is our new opportunity to redesign our entire waste system. And the European Union and Berkeley have come out with really strong ways to address single-use plastics, get rid of some single-use plastics, really focus on source reduction, get back to the milkman model, where like bottles come around, you drink it, put them back in the thing, they come and pick it up, they go fill it up, because you're actually buying the milk, you're not buying the bottle and all the other stuff. So we're really working on how do we create a circular economy right here in Southern California, and focus on what are the materials that we need to create solar panels, and what are the other things, heat pumps, one of the things we were talking about, refrigerant. How can we incentivize companies to come build that here and then pull from our waste stream the raw materials they need to create that. So that's what our green sword policy is. And then this is really our big drawdown thing that we can do from the city, which is back in 1935, you know, they had the Dust Bowl, and the reason the Dust Bowl was so bad is because farmers weren't rebuilding their soil. And I think you said, well, we've got 30 years left of topsoil or something like that. And so what we're doing is capturing our food waste on a massive level. We've got 4 million people in Los Angeles, 10 million people in LA County. And if we can spread it that big, compost it, we've got some really large agricultural communities in Ventura County and the Central Valley. Send it up there, build the healthy topsoil that we need, grow the plants that we eat through our plant-rich diets, and start really to draw down on a massive scale. And it's possible, so we're piloting it. We've got a little farm that we're taking our compost to in the Central Valley, and it's working. And the crops are being raised, and they're selling the crops. And it's exciting, and I get goosebumps thinking about it. So it's happening, and you know, I want it to go faster all the time, but we're going as fast as the gigantic bureaucracy can go. So, you know, what we've begun to realize is what happens in Los Angeles does not stay in Los Angeles. It echoes around the world. The Guardian newspaper called us the #1 branded city in the whole world right now. You know, in the like 1700s it was Paris, at 1800s it was London, last century it was New York, now it's us. People watch what we do, people are modeling what we do, particularly on climate change. California is thought to be one of the climate leaders. And so the spread of the climate emergency declaration shows how fast good ideas can spread. And cities are where we're going to make it happen. So we need to keep churning out good programs. We need to keep supporting good programs. We need to get everybody engaged. And what I want to do is get all these cities who have declared climate emergencies to work together on policy solutions now and do them at the same time, building electrification, get rid of gas burning cars, and really start to do this in such a way that the bad guys can't keep up with us. Because they do, and they got lots of money, and they kick our ass all the time. So this is why I do what I do. You know, it took me more than 4 decades to be evacuated from my home. These guys have been evacuated, including from smoke, twice, 4 times before they were 5. And that's just insane. You know, we made it fun. We went to Legoland, and we went to see Thomas the Train out of Lake Elsinore. So they love it when we get evacuated. But it's a precursor to what's coming. And every day I get up and I look them in the eye and I say, okay, what can I do for you today? What can I do for your future? So, you know, I'm asking you to do it for them, but do it for your version of them too. Because they're counting on me, and they're counting on you, and we can all do this. And we've got the tools. The cool thing is Paul Hawken is coming out with a new book. I heard him speak in October, and he's hard at work on his next thing. And he's really thinking the right way, and he's one of the immune response cells that's popped up. So this is where you find me. And now I think we're ready to take some questions or discuss, whatever you want to do.
Just before we do that, I just think your handoff to the youth is a great segue.
Afforestation could draw down 3 gigatons of CO2 by 2030. And yeah, there's 2 methods of afforestation tree intercropping with me and my friend Emma worked on. Basically, the Miyawaki method is where you plant dozens of native trees and plants just crazy together. Doesn't matter. It's just a forest, actual forest. And the other way is a typical single-story tree plantation in places where it forces not free growth, and they're good for harvesting trees. And this way is not good for harvesting trees, but it's said that the native trees are better to plant and actually draw down more CO2 than the other trees. And yeah.
Now Owen is going to give us some facts and figures, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I researched a little bit about refrigerant management, and I have this paper here. So, refrigerant management is the #1 solution to drawdown. And by 2050, 89.74 gigatons of CO2 could be prevented from going into the atmosphere, which is equivalent to over 35,600,000 metric tons. All refrigerators and AC units contain chemicals that absorb and release heat to enable chilling. CFCs and HCFCs were once responsible for depleting ozone layer, but now CFCs have been phased out. The primary replacement is are HCFCs, which spare ozone but are 1,000 to 9,000 times, have a 1,000 to 9,000 times greater capacity to warm the Earth's atmosphere than CO2. And we already have some sustainable alternatives on the market, like propane and ammonia. Yeah.
Thank you, Owen.
So do you recommend that we stop using our air conditioner? Is that a good plan? I'm kind of thinking that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Winter, yeah.
Are they cleaner though? I mean, is it the same chemicals?
Yeah.
And maybe, like, I wonder wondering about refrigerating. How
Yeah.
you have double, you have 2 refrigerators, maybe.
I'll say what I know, and then if Tuck knows more. But my understanding is that in the United States, after 2019, if you buy a refrigerator, it will not have the HFCs in there. After 2019, so starting now, right? And you should be able to find out by virtue of your new purchase. If you have an older refrigerator, you need to recycle it properly. I don't know exactly what that means yet, but I know that's what we're supposed to do. So you're not supposed to put your old refrigerator in the trash or anything like that. You need to figure that out, and I don't know if Andy knows or if Tuck knows about that, but yeah. We're working on changing the system like Andy was talking about in a greater way. Yeah?
Sophie?
Stella.
Sorry, Stella. So what do you recommend? What can I do about the trees?
So you can go and use Ecosia and websites that basically if you search on it or give it money, then they will plant the trees for you. That's good too, but one of my friends in my class actually planted a tree as their Christmas tree at Christmas, and outside there was a pine tree and they decorated it. It was really nice, and you can plant trees too once in a while. Composting is also a good thing too, to compost. And yeah, actually sometimes I guess because people are demanding paper, they cut down the rainforest, but you could also grow trees. I know it will take a while, but growing trees would also be good, and then cutting them down. Yeah, because growing trees, with the trees also, while they're growing, they also draw down the CO2 because they need to grow with that. Yeah.
Absolutely.